Get out. Don't pretend you understand this, custodian. Professor Elizabeth Harrington pointed toward the door, her polished finger jabbing the air like a dagger. The 42-year-old physics genius had just humiliated Marcus Thompson in front of 25 postdoctoral fellows, treating him like grime under her luxury boots. Marcus's hands froze on his maintenance trolley. Every eye in the seminar room burned into his back as fellows smirked at the spectacle. Harrington stood beside her whiteboard covered in intricate formulas, her doctorate diplomas shining on the wall behind her like badges of scholarly dominance. But instead of leaving, Marcus stepped closer to the scientific derivation she'd been presenting. His sharp eyes scanned the precise notations with an intensity that made Harrington's assured grin waver for just a second. "Actually, Professor," Marcus said softly, his voice slicing through the quiet, "there's a flaw in your second step." The room burst into astonished murmurs. What happens when the person you underestimate knows more than you do? The humiliation echoed through Eldridge University's granite corridors like a war cry. Within hours, rumors spread across the prestigious grounds. The custodian had dared challenge Professor Elizabeth Harrington, physics department's emerging icon. Harrington's executive suite overlooked pristine gardens, where students in high-end attire discussed hypotheses over premium lattes. Her walls displayed diplomas from Yale, Princeton, and Oxford, a temple to scholarly dominance. Published articles bore her name in renowned periodicals. At staff galas, she debated studies with Fields Medal winners while sipping spirits that cost more than most people's weekly wages. Meanwhile, Marcus Thompson pushed his maintenance trolley through scholarly structures after dusk. His 8-to-4 shift covered 4 distinct buildings, emptying bins, scrubbing surfaces, replenishing materials. During short pauses, he studied advanced physics manuals hidden behind repair guides. Soda-stained journals filled with intricate derivations occupied his storage space alongside sanitizing agents. The campus pecking order was crystal clear. Students paid $78,000 per year for the privilege of breathing Eldridge's elite atmosphere. Faculty members lived in marble towers, their expertise measured by outputs and funding. Support staff remained unseen, human fixtures existing only to sustain the scholarly utopia. Harrington had never questioned this natural order. Expertise required proper lineage, costly schooling, and professional networks. She dated Dr. Nathan Hale from Yale's physics department, reinforcing her belief that genius belonged exclusively to the accredited elite. When service workers entered her lecture space, she automatically assumed they lacked the scholarly capacity for meaningful dialogue. Security personnel routinely questioned Marcus's presence in scholarly buildings after standard hours. Students shifted their laptops when he entered lounge areas, treating him like a potential risk. Faculty members looked through him as if he were transparent, their discussions halting whenever he approached. But Harrington's perfectly ordered world was about to fracture. The annual Gauss's contest represented scientific excellence at its finest. $60,000 and automatic doctorate admission to any participating institution awaited the winner. Global physics departments watched the event devoutly, using outcomes to recruit ability and gauge scholarly prestige. Harrington served as chief evaluator, her reputation built on identifying true scientific prodigy. For 12 years, she had correctly predicted which entrants possessed the scholarly depth for advanced inquiry. Her judgment was considered infallible among scholarly circles. This year promised to be her greatest victory. 15 entrants had qualified. Yale doctorate students, Princeton investigators, Stanford academics, each possessed flawless credentials and years of formal instruction. The contest would showcase proper scientific education at its finest. But something nagged at Harrington's assurance. That afternoon's incident replayed in her mind like a faulty tape. Marcus's observation about her derivation had been accurate, embarrassingly so. She had spent 15 minutes reworking the formulas before finding her analytical mistake. How had a custodian spotted something she had missed? Harrington rationalized the anomaly. Fortunate hunch. Perhaps he had overheard postdoctoral discussions. Maybe someone had helped him identify the error. Custodian certainly didn't understand advanced quantum mechanics through independent study, yet doubt crept into her thoughts during quiet moments. Marcus's scientific notation had appeared surprisingly refined. His explanation of the flaw demonstrated genuine comprehension, not mere recitation. Something about his analytical method felt familiar, almost expert. She pushed these uncomfortable thoughts aside. The natural order demanded respect. Expertise followed predictable patterns: proper schooling, formal instruction, scholarly credentials. Exceptions didn't exist in her carefully constructed worldview. During staff meetings, Harrington discussed maintaining scholarly standards. She emphasized the importance of rigorous assessment, ensuring only qualified entrants accessed advanced schooling. Her colleagues nodded approvingly, trusting her judgment about scientific talent. But late at night, when campus grew quiet and Marcus's maintenance trolley echoed through empty passageways, Harrington found herself wondering about the man behind the attire. What drove someone to work 4 jobs while studying physics in stolen moments? What kind of mind could spot flaws that escaped Yale-educated professors? These questions threatened everything she believed about expertise, schooling, and social hierarchy. The Gauss's contest would settle these doubts once and for all. Scientific truth was absolute. Either you possessed genuine comprehension, or you didn't. Credentials and formal instruction would triumph over fortunate hunches and amateur zeal. Harrington had spent her career building walls between scholarly elite and working class. Those barriers protected the sanctity of scholarly achievement, ensuring only the worthy received recognition. Soon, those walls would face their greatest test. What happens when the foundation of everything you believe begins to crumble? 4 days later, Harrington stood before a crowded theater, announcing the Gauss's contest enrollment. Her zeal was contagious as she described the scholarly rigor required, her passion for physics making her genuinely captivating for the first time in years. "This contest represents the pinnacle of scientific achievement," she declared, her voice carrying across the hall, filled with ambitious postdoctoral fellows. $60,000 and automatic doctorate admission await those with true scholarly depth. Her eyes sparkled with the fire that had originally drawn her to physics before bias and conceit clouded her vision. A Yale postdoctoral fellow raised his hand. "Professor Harrington, can all institution personnel enter the contest?" Harrington's smile turned condescending, her momentary vulnerability vanishing like mist. "Technically, yes, but advanced physics requires years of formal instruction. We wouldn't want anyone embarrassing themselves publicly." Her gaze swept across the room, deliberately finding Marcus near the rear exit, where he had paused during his upkeep rounds. The message was unmistakable. "Let me demonstrate the level of sophistication required," Harrington continued, approaching the whiteboard with dramatic flair. She wrote a mechanics differentiation problem that looked deceptively simple, but required advanced strategies. Anyone unable to solve this probably shouldn't waste our time with the real contest. Fellows bent over journals working through complex differentiation methods. The problem involved exponential functions raised to various powers, the kind that required special substitution tricks and differentiation by parts. After several minutes, most arrived at the correct numerical answer. Harrington nodded approvingly as fellows shared their solutions. "Excellent work. This represents the minimum scientific maturity we expect." As she reached for the eraser, preparing to conclude her demonstration, Marcus's quiet voice cut through the satisfied murmur. "Professor Harrington, there's a more elegant approach using symmetry properties." The theater fell silent. Every head turned toward the man in upkeep overalls who had dared interrupt a scholarly presentation. Harrington's hand froze on the eraser. Her carefully practiced smile tightened as she turned to face this unprecedented challenge to her authority. "Oh, really?" Her voice dripped with disdain. "Please enlighten us with your insights." The tension crackled as Marcus walked toward the front of the room. His presence commanded attention despite his attire. Shoulders straight, movements assured, eyes focused on the scientific challenge rather than the hostile stares. Harrington stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy, gesturing toward the whiteboard like a matador offering a cape to a bull. Marcus picked up chalk with steady hands. His scientific handwriting was crisp, expert, and surprisingly refined. Instead of following the fellow's complex approaches, he used a clever substitution that exploited the symmetry of the exponential functions. By recognizing that this derivative has mirror symmetry, Marcus explained clearly, we can transform it into a much simpler form, the same answer but with half the work. His approach was scientifically beautiful, revealing why the derivative had its particular value rather than just computing it through brute force. Postdoctoral fellows leaned forward following his elegant reasoning. Even Harrington found herself impressed, despite her growing alarm. The answer is the same, Marcus concluded. But this method shows the underlying scientific structure. Scattered applause broke out before dying under Harrington's withering stare. Her competitive nature flared, threatened by this unexpected display of scientific sophistication. In a moment of reckless pride fueled by confusion and unwilling attraction, she strode to the whiteboard and wrote a complex partial equation from her own research. Fine. If you think you're so scientifically gifted. She turned to face him, her voice carrying across the silent theater. Solve this equation, and I'll marry you. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The joke was clearly intended to humiliate, but there was an edge of real challenge beneath the mockery. Marcus studied the problem for 45 seconds that felt like hours. Then he began writing. What happens when arrogance meets its match? Harrington's partial equation stared back at her from the whiteboard like an accusation. She had written it impulsively, never expecting the custodian to attempt a solution. This was postdoctoral level physics, something that had taken her weeks to solve during her doctoral inquiry. The theater held its breath as Marcus approached the problem with methodical precision. His chalk moved across the board with surprising assurance, each symbol placed deliberately. Harrington watched his technique, looking for signs of confusion or hesitation that would confirm her worldview. They never came. Instead, Marcus worked through the complex equation step by step. He identified the problem type, chose the right scientific tools, and applied them with the fluidity of someone who understood the underlying structure. Within 7 minutes, he had produced a complete solution. Harrington's face drained of color as she verified his work. Every step was correct. The answer matched her own research exactly. Professor Harrington, Marcus said quietly, setting down the chalk. The solution checks out. Would you like me to verify the boundary conditions? The room erupted in stunned whispers. Fellows pulled out phones, recognizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Word spread through social media like wildfire. A custodian had just solved a research-level problem in front of Yale's best and brightest. Lucky guess, Harrington managed, her voice lacking its usual assurance. One problem doesn't prove scientific maturity. Anyone can memorize techniques without understanding theory. But her protest rang hollow. The elegance of Marcus's solution revealed deep comprehension, not mere memorization. Dr. Sophia Martinez, visiting from Berkeley as a guest speaker, had been watching from the back of the theater. Her experienced eye recognized genuine scientific talent when she saw it. Something about Marcus's approach felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. That was quite impressive. Dr. Martinez said, approaching the front, "Your method was both rigorous and insightful." Harrington's jaw tightened. Having another professor praise the custodian threatened everything she had built her career upon. "Since you're so confident," Mr. Harrington's voice carried barely controlled frustration. "Thompson, Marcus Thompson." "Mr. Thompson, I officially invite you to enter the Gauss's contest." But when you fail publicly, remember I tried to spare you the embarrassment. The gauntlet was thrown. Scholarly pride versus working-class determination. The entire physics community would be watching. Enrollment opened the following morning. Harrington conducted preliminary screening personally. Unusual for a department head, but she needed to maintain control. If Marcus was going to humiliate himself, she wanted front-row seats. The screening required solving 3 increasingly difficult problems. Harrington designed them specifically to expose gaps in informal education, problems requiring years of structured learning to master. 15 entrants gathered in the meeting room. 14 were postdoctoral fellows from prestigious institutions with impeccable scholarly pedigrees. Then there was Marcus, still wearing his upkeep uniform, looking completely out of place among the scholarly elite. Evan Brooks from Yale cracked his knuckles confidently. Laura Jenkins, Harrington's own protégé, reviewed her notes one final time. Jordan Hayes from Princeton adjusted his luxury spectacles with practiced arrogance. "You have 120 minutes," Harrington announced. "Solve all 3 problems completely." Problem 1 involved finding the minimum value of a function with constraints. While others worked through lengthy calculations, Marcus used geometric reasoning to visualize the problem. He saw the solution as a point where 2 surfaces met, solving it with elegant simplicity rather than brute force computation. Problem 2 required analyzing a special type of tensor. Postdoctoral fellows worked through complex formulas and solved multiple equations. Marcus immediately recognized a pattern in the tensor structure, reading the answer directly without lengthy calculations. Problem 3 was a famous historical problem about infinite fields. This stumped most entrants who attempted various advanced techniques. Marcus surprised everyone by explaining the classical approach that the great physicist Gauss had used centuries ago, demonstrating knowledge of scientific history that impressed even the most skeptical observers. Time, Harrington called, though her voice had lost its commanding edge. As solutions were reviewed, a disturbing pattern emerged. Marcus's answers weren't just correct, they were consistently more elegant than those of doctorate candidates. His approaches revealed a deeper understanding of scientific structure and history. Dr. Martinez examined the papers with growing fascination. Marcus's scientific style triggered memories she couldn't quite grasp. Something about his notation, his proof techniques, his choice of methods. "All entrants pass," Harrington announced reluctantly. "The contest begins tomorrow." But the real contest had already begun in Harrington's mind. Her worldview was cracking under the pressure of undeniable evidence. How could someone without formal education demonstrate such sophisticated scientific understanding? That evening, alone in her suite, Harrington researched Marcus Thompson online. She found nothing. No scholarly publications, no institution records, no trace of scientific training. The mystery deepened her frustration and unwilling fascination. Social media exploded with coverage of the unprecedented qualifying session. #Custodian Professor began trending internationally. Physics departments worldwide debated the implications. Could genuine talent exist outside traditional scholarly channels? Harrington's Yale boyfriend called that night, his voice dripping with disdain. "Elizabeth, surely you're not taking this custodian seriously. It's embarrassing for the department." But Harrington couldn't shake the image of Marcus's assured chalkwork, his elegant solutions, his quiet dignity under pressure. For the first time in her career, she questioned whether expertise might not follow the predictable patterns she had always assumed. The stakes were rising beyond scholarly pride. Her reputation, her beliefs about merit and education, her entire professional identity hung in the balance. How far would she go to protect everything she thought she knew about genius? The main theater buzzed with electric anticipation. 900 seats packed with students, faculty, and curious onlookers who had heard rumors of the custodian who dared challenge scholarly royalty. Global livestream viewers climbed toward 30,000 as word spread through physics communities worldwide. Harrington stood at the podium, her luxury outfit and assured demeanor projecting absolute authority. As department head and chief evaluator, she controlled every aspect of the contest. This was her domain, her rules, her moment to restore natural order. "Welcome to the annual Gauss's contest," she announced, her voice carrying across the hushed theater. "Today, we celebrate scientific excellence in its purest form. True scientific maturity comes from years of rigorous training and proper preparation." Her eyes found Marcus among the 15 qualified contestants. The subtext was unmistakable. The contest format was elegantly brutal. 3 rounds of escalating difficulty with elimination at each stage. Round 1 would cut 15 contestants to 7. Semifinals would narrow 7 to 4. The championship round would crown a single winner. Harrington had designed the progression specifically to favor formal education over raw talent. Each round would require increasingly advanced knowledge, typically acquired only through years of graduate school. "Our evaluating panel represents scientific excellence," Harrington continued, introducing professors from Yale, Princeton, and Berkeley. "Dr." Martinez nodded politely from her position, though something in her expression suggested growing unease with the proceedings. The contestants were introduced one by one. Evan Brooks, Yale postdoctoral fellow. Laura Jenkins, Harrington's star pupil with multiple published articles. Jordan Hayes from Princeton. Lucas Martinez from Berkeley. Rebecca Lee from Stanford. Each introduction highlighted prestigious institutions and impressive achievements. Then came Marcus Thompson, simply identified as institution maintenance staff. Awkward silence filled the theater. A few scattered chuckles from the audience reflected the absurdity everyone felt, witnessing a custodian among the scholarly elite. Harrington's smile widened with satisfaction. The contrast couldn't be more perfect for her purposes. "Round 1 begins now," she announced. "Contestants will solve problems at individual whiteboards while our audience observes. Complete transparency ensures integrity." The elimination problem appeared on the main screen. "Prove that adding the first few even numbers always gives you a perfect triangle." This was intentionally straightforward, something any college physics student should handle easily. Harrington wanted to build confidence in her legitimate candidates while giving Marcus enough rope to hang himself publicly. Most contestants attacked the problem with formal scientific proofs. They wrote complex formulas, used advanced logical reasoning, and followed prescribed scholarly methods. Their solutions were textbook perfect, exactly what any professor would expect from postdoctoral fellows. But Marcus did something completely unexpected. While others filled their boards with complicated equations, he drew simple diagrams. He arranged lines in triangular patterns, showing how adding even numbers created larger and larger perfect triangles. Each line represented a number, and the visual pattern made the scientific truth immediately obvious. "Look," he explained to the amazed audience, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "Physics isn't about memorizing complex formulas. It's about seeing the underlying pattern." His visual proof was instant and beautiful. Anyone in the audience could understand it just by looking, even without physics training. The lines formed perfect triangles that grew naturally as you added more numbers. Dr. Martinez leaned forward with genuine excitement. "Absolutely brilliant," she whispered to her fellow evaluators. "That's real scientific insight." The live stream chat exploded with appreciation from viewers worldwide. Comments flooded in. "I finally understand physics. Why don't teachers explain it this way? Pure genius." Harrington's assurance wavered as she witnessed the audience's enthusiastic reaction. Visual proofs were perfectly valid physics, but they revealed a type of natural insight that couldn't be taught through rote memorization. "Mr. Thompson's approach is creative," she managed, her voice tight with barely concealed anxiety. "But advanced physics requires more than diagrams. Real scientific theory demands rigorous formal methods." Her dismissive tone fooled no one. Everyone could see she was rattled. Round 1 results were announced. All contestants advanced to semifinals, but the audience's energy clearly favored Marcus's innovative solution over the mechanical textbook approaches. During the break, social media erupted worldwide. #custodian genius trended internationally. Scholarly Twitter divided into heated debates about talent versus formal education. Romantic shippers emerged with #Harrington Thompson hashtags, fascinated by the obvious tension between the brilliant professor and mysterious maintenance worker. Institution board members arrived to observe what had become an international phenomenon. Harrington's Yale ex-boyfriend flew in specifically to witness what he called Elizabeth's amusing little circus. Major news networks sent crews as they recognized the broader cultural story unfolding. Dr. Martinez approached Harrington privately during intermission, her expression deeply concerned. "Elizabeth, this contest format seems unusually harsh. Are you sure the problem difficulty is appropriate?" "We maintain the highest standards," Harrington replied defensively, though sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. "Scientific excellence requires no compromises." But Martinez's worried look suggested she recognized something troubling in Harrington's motivations. As semifinals approached, Harrington announced the next round would focus on postdoctoral level mechanics, her personal area of expertise in the most technical field, requiring years of specialized training. For the first time, Marcus looked genuinely uncertain. The advanced physics ahead was far beyond anything he could visualize with simple diagrams. Harrington's triumphant smile returned as she sensed victory within reach. What happens when natural talent faces its ultimate test? The night before the semifinals changed everything. Marcus sat alone in the institution library at 3 a.m., surrounded by thick textbooks that might as well have been written in a foreign language. The advanced physics ahead wasn't like the problems he'd solved before. This time, clever thinking and visual patterns wouldn't be enough. He was entering Harrington's world now, a realm of specialized knowledge that typically required years of graduate school to master. Meanwhile, Harrington couldn't sleep. She paced her elegant condo, luxury heels clicking against tile floors. Tomorrow's problems were specifically designed to eliminate Marcus once and for all. She should feel victorious, but instead a strange emptiness gnawed at her chest. Why did proving herself right feel so much like losing? Despite the overwhelming challenge, something remarkable began to happen. Marcus started connecting the advanced concepts to simpler ideas he already understood. Complex scientific theories weren't completely foreign. They were extensions of basic principles he'd mastered years ago, like learning that a skyscraper was built using the same foundations as a simple shed. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, finding familiar patterns hidden beneath intimidating terminology. His natural intuition was guiding him through uncharted territory. Online viewers watching the library security cameras were amazed. Comments flooded in. "He's teaching himself postdoctoral level physics in one night. This is impossible, but it's happening." But the next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Institution security questioned Marcus's after-hours library access. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint about inappropriate use of educational resources by non-scholarly personnel. Harrington's fingerprints were all over the harassment, though she maintained plausible deniability. "Perhaps maintenance staff should focus on their assigned duties," the security chief suggested coldly. "Academic facilities are reserved for legitimate educational purposes." The message was crystal clear. Stay in your lane. During the pre-contest briefing, Evan Brooks approached Marcus hesitantly. The Yale postdoctoral fellow had spent the night reconsidering everything he'd witnessed. "I need to tell you something," Evan said quietly. "Watching you solve problems has taught me more about real physics than 4 years of graduate school. You see connections that the rest of us miss completely." Laura Jenkins nodded in agreement. "Professor Harrington taught us formulas, but you understand the underlying meaning. That's much more valuable. Even his former rivals were beginning to recognize genuine brilliance when they saw it. However, media attention brought vicious criticism alongside growing support. Scholarly elitists used social media to question whether someone without proper qualifications belonged in serious scientific discourse. This is a publicity stunt that damages the integrity of higher education, wrote Dr. Benjamin Hale, Harrington's Yale boyfriend, in a widely shared editorial. Scientific competence requires systematic training, not amateur theatrics. The attacks became personal, targeting Marcus's appearance, background, and presumptuous challenge to established scholarly order. Harrington amplified these criticisms through carefully worded public statements about maintaining rigorous standards. Something clicked during Marcus's final preparation session. The advanced scientific concepts weren't as mysterious as they initially appeared. They followed logical patterns. He could trace and understand. Despite the intimidating technical language, he realized that physics was like a vast, interconnected web. Every advanced idea connected to simpler concepts through logical threads. Once you saw those connections, the complexity became manageable. It's all the same physics, he told himself with growing confidence. Just different ways of looking at the same underlying truth. But institution policy prohibited unpaid leave for personal activities. Marcus still worked his regular upkeep shifts while preparing for the most important scientific challenge of his life. By Friday, exhaustion was taking its toll. Harrington noticed him struggling to stay alert during a break between rounds. Perhaps demanding work schedules aren't compatible with serious scholarly pursuits, she commented loudly enough for news cameras to capture. Some people simply aren't positioned for this level of intellectual commitment. The cruel observation stung because it contained a grain of truth. Marcus was fighting this battle while carrying burdens his competitors couldn't imagine. Semi-final day arrived with the theater buzzing with anticipation. 7 contestants took their positions as the problem appeared on the main screen, its technical language intimidating to most viewers. Determine the stability properties of this infinite scientific series and analyze its behavior. To general audiences, it looked impossibly complex. But Marcus saw past the scary terminology to the underlying question. Does this scientific pattern stabilize or spiral out of control? While other contestants mechanically applied memorized formulas, Marcus used intuitive reasoning to understand what the problem was really asking. He drew simple graphs showing how the scientific series behaved, sometimes settling into predictable patterns, sometimes growing wildly. Think of it like a swinging pendulum, he explained to the audience, his voice calm and clear. Sometimes the swings get smaller and eventually stop. Sometimes they get bigger and never end. The physics tells us which type of behavior we're dealing with. His explanation made postdoctoral level mechanics accessible to ordinary people while remaining completely accurate. The theater exploded in appreciation. Dr. Martinez stood and applauded openly, her eyes shining with admiration. "Extraordinary," she announced to the evaluating panel. "This demonstrates the deepest possible understanding of scientific principles. He's not just solving problems, he's revealing the beauty hidden within complex theory." Even Harrington felt a surge of unwilling respect. This wasn't luck or clever guessing. This was genuine scientific brilliance operating at the highest level. When results were announced, 4 contestants remained. Laura Jenkins, Harrington's star student, Evan Brooks, Yale's representative, and Marcus Thompson, the custodian who refused to accept limitations. Global viewership peaked at 90,000 people. Scholarly institutions worldwide watched to see whether their fundamental assumptions about intelligence and education would survive this unprecedented challenge. That evening, Harrington crafted the ultimate test. She selected a problem from her own doctoral dissertation, something that had taken her 4 years to solve, with full institution resources, expert advisors, and unlimited time. If anything could expose the limits of self-education and natural talent, this would be it. Tomorrow's final problem will require the deepest possible scientific sophistication, she announced to assembled media. Only authentic scientific maturity will suffice. Marcus stood alone in his small apartment that night, looking at his father's hospital bills piled on the kitchen table. Tomorrow's contest would determine everything: his treatment, his future, his dreams of returning to the scholarly world he'd been forced to abandon. But more than money was at stake. Millions of people who'd been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed were watching to see if raw talent could triumph over institutional prejudice. Dr. Martinez sat in her hotel room, still troubled by the familiar feeling she couldn't shake. Something about Marcus's scientific approach kept triggering memories she couldn't quite access. His style, his intuition, his way of seeing problems, it all felt like encountering an old friend whose name she'd forgotten. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate test of everything they all believed about genius, education, and human potential. Could one man's brilliance overcome a system designed to exclude him? Championship morning arrived with unprecedented fanfare. News crews positioned cameras throughout the theater. The live stream audience had swollen to over 120,000 viewers worldwide, all waiting to witness the final showdown between genius and prejudice. Harrington took the stage with unusual confidence, her luxury suit immaculate, her expression radiating absolute control. She had spent the entire night crafting what she considered the perfect trap. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying across the packed theater. "Today's final challenge represents true scientific excellence. Given the unprecedented global attention this contest has received, I'm implementing what I call the Harrington Standard, the most rigorous examination of scientific maturity ever attempted." Dr. Martinez shifted uncomfortably in her evaluating seat. Something about Harrington's tone suggested this wasn't about scientific excellence anymore. This felt personal. Instead of a single problem, Harrington announced a brutal 3-part gauntlet designed to crush any hope Marcus might have harbored. First, solve a research-level problem in 120 minutes. Second, present the solution to a panel of expert physicists. Third, defend the approach against aggressive questioning from specialists. This format will separate authentic scientific maturity from enthusiastic guesswork, Harrington declared, her eyes finding Marcus among the 4 remaining contestants. The real betrayal came when the problem appeared on the main screen. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized what Harrington had done. This wasn't just difficult. It was her own doctoral research, a challenge she had spent 4 years solving with unlimited resources and expert guidance. The technical language looked intimidating to the audience, but physicists in the room immediately understood the impossible situation Harrington had created. This required specialized knowledge from multiple graduate fields that typically took years to master properly. Laura Jenkins and Evan Brooks exchanged knowing glances. As postdoctoral fellows in Harrington's scholarly circle, they had encountered variations of this problem in her advanced seminars. They possessed years of relevant coursework and direct access to Harrington's published research methods. Marcus had 120 minutes to solve what Harrington herself had needed 4 years to complete. Murmurs of discontent rippled through the theater as the scientific community recognized the setup. The live stream chat exploded with outrage from viewers worldwide who understood they were witnessing scholarly fraud in real time. Dr. Martinez stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Elizabeth, this complexity problem seems entirely inappropriate for a general physics contest." "Excellence demands the highest standards," Harrington replied coldly, her voice carrying across the silent theater. "We cannot lower our expectations simply because some participants lack proper preparation." Harrington's gaze locked onto Marcus as she delivered her final psychological blow. "You have 120 minutes to prove you belong among serious physicists. Anyone unable to demonstrate authentic scientific sophistication should consider withdrawing gracefully rather than embarrassing themselves further." The timer began its merciless countdown. Marcus stared at the impossible problem, recognizing immediately that Harrington had transported the contest into territory where his self-education couldn't possibly reach. For the first time, his unshakable confidence began to crack. What happens when natural talent faces a completely rigged game? The theater fell into suffocating silence as the 120-minute timer began its relentless countdown. 120,000 viewers worldwide held their breath, watching four physicists face Harrington's impossible challenge. Laura and Evan immediately dove into familiar territory, their years of graduate training guiding them through Harrington's specialized research methods. They wrote confidently, building upon foundations laid in countless seminars and study sessions with access to all her published work. Marcus stared at the problem like a man facing his execution. The first 40 minutes were pure agony. While his competitors filled their whiteboards with sophisticated equations, Marcus struggled to find any entry point into Harrington's labyrinthine challenge. Scientific mechanics required knowledge he simply didn't possess. Advanced theories, specialized techniques, frameworks that demanded years of formal study to understand properly. His whiteboard remained painfully empty, except for a few tentative scratches that led nowhere. Harrington provided commentary for the livestream audience, her voice dripping with vindicated satisfaction. We're witnessing the fundamental difference between authentic scientific education and amateur enthusiasm. Advanced problems require systematic knowledge built over many years of rigorous study. By minute 60, the cameras captured Marcus's growing desperation. He started multiple approaches, erased them, tried again. Each false start revealed the depth of his disadvantage more clearly to the watching world. Meanwhile, Laura and Evan steadily progressed through Harrington's expected solution path, their formal training providing detailed roadmaps through the complex theoretical landscape that Marcus was navigating blind. Comments flooded the live stream with crushing observations. He's completely lost. This is painful to watch. Harrington was right about needing proper education. The custodian finally hit his limit. Scholarly Twitter erupted with vindicated reactions from Harrington supporters. The narrative was shifting rapidly from underdog triumph to amateur exposure by harsh reality. Everything Harrington had predicted was coming true before a global audience. At minute 80, disaster struck. Marcus made a critical error in his third attempt, misapplying a theorem he only partially understood from hasty textbook reading. The mistake cascaded through his work like a virus, invalidating everything he had painstakingly built. He stood motionless, chalk trembling in his hand, staring at equations that mocked his inadequacy. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Thompson looked utterly defeated. Harrington's voice cut through the silence like a blade designed for maximum damage. Perhaps we should allow struggling participants to withdraw with dignity rather than continue this painful display. Some challenges simply exceed the limits of informal preparation. The suggestion landed like a physical blow. News cameras zoomed in on Marcus's face, capturing the exact moment when unshakable confidence crumbled into doubt and shame. This image would be replayed millions of times, the moment a genius met its match against institutional knowledge. Harrington continued her psychological assault, addressing the global audience with clinical precision. This demonstrates exactly why scholarly standards exist. Scientific sophistication cannot be improvised or wished into existence. It requires proper foundations, systematic training, and institutional support that simply cannot be replaced by enthusiasm. Every word felt designed to crush Marcus's spirit completely, while justifying everything Harrington had always believed about intelligence and social hierarchy. At minute 100, Marcus set his chalk down and closed his eyes. He appeared ready to concede defeat gracefully, accepting that natural talent had finally met an insurmountable wall. The theater held its breath as he seemed to gather himself for a dignified withdrawal. Harrington's triumphant smile suggested she had finally proven her fundamental point about the necessity of formal education and proper credentials. But then, Dr. Martinez rose from her evaluating position, unable to remain silent any longer. "Before we continue," Martinez announced, her voice carrying unusual authority that commanded attention throughout the silent theater. "I want to remind everyone that scientific history is filled with breakthrough discoveries made by individuals who ignored conventional wisdom and found new paths to truth." She wasn't helping Marcus directly, but her words carried deeper meaning that resonated through the tension. The most profound insights often come from minds unbound by traditional approaches. Sometimes the greatest scientific truths are found by those brave enough to see problems through completely fresh eyes. Martinez's intervention triggered something deep in Marcus's consciousness. A memory surfaced from years ago during his abandoned graduate studies at Princeton, not identical to Harrington's challenge, but related through underlying scientific principles that transcended her specialized approach. Harrington's formulation was sophisticated and technical, but maybe there was a classical pathway that could bypass all the specialized machinery she expected. Marcus opened his eyes and reached for his chalk with sudden, renewed purpose. Could 20 minutes be enough to attempt the impossible? Marcus picked up his chalk with trembling hands, but his eyes now burned with desperate determination. 20 minutes remained on the clock, barely enough time to write his name, let alone solve Harrington's 4-year doctoral problem. The entire theater watched in stunned silence as he began erasing his previous failed attempts. Instead of following the advanced theoretical pathway that Harrington expected, Marcus started writing something completely different. He was going back to basics. While Laura and Evan continued building elaborate modern solutions using cutting-edge scientific machinery, Marcus began constructing his approach using classical techniques from the foundations of scientific analysis, methods that were old when Harrington's grandmother was born, but possessed an elegant simplicity that transcended specialized knowledge. "What is he doing?" whispered a Yale professor in the audience. Harrington watched with growing alarm as Marcus's whiteboard filled with unfamiliar but scientifically valid reasoning. This wasn't the solution path she had spent 4 years developing. This was something else entirely. With 12 minutes left, Marcus's approach began taking shape. He was treating Harrington's complex boundary value problem as an optimization challenge, finding the scientific configuration that required the least effort, like light naturally taking the shortest path to find the quickest route. His chalk moved with increasing confidence as the classical methods revealed their power. Where Harrington had used advanced functional analysis, Marcus employed direct variational techniques. Where she had relied on sophisticated operator theory, he used elegant effort estimates that any graduate student could follow. The scientific community in the audience began stirring with recognition. This wasn't amateur fumbling. This was a completely valid alternative approach to one of the most challenging problems in scientific mechanics. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her eyes widening with amazement. She had seen this style before, this particular way of seeing problems through classical lenses. The memory was almost within reach now. Time expired. Marcus stepped back from his whiteboard, which displayed a complete solution using methods that hadn't been fashionable in decades, but remained scientifically bulletproof. Harrington stared at his work in shocked silence. Her 4-year struggle with advanced techniques had been bypassed by approaches she had dismissed as outdated. "Ladies and gentlemen," the contest director announced, "we now move to the presentation phase. Each finalist will have 25 minutes to explain their solution." Laura went first, delivering a competent but unremarkable explanation of Harrington's published methodology. Evan followed with similar results: solid, predictable, forgettable. Then came Marcus's turn. He approached the microphone with quiet dignity, his maintenance uniform a stark contrast to his competitor's scholarly attire, but his presence commanding absolute attention from the global audience. "I solved this problem using classical variational methods," Marcus began, his voice steady and clear. "While examining the challenge, I realized it could be understood as asking a fundamental question. What scientific shape minimizes effort while satisfying the given constraints?" Harrington interrupted sharply, unable to contain herself. "Mr. Thompson, this problem requires advanced functional analysis and operator theory. Classical methods are insufficient for nonlinear boundary value problems of this sophistication." Marcus turned to face her directly, his response carrying the weight of everything he had endured. "Professor Harrington, with respect, I believe your assumption about required methods may be unnecessarily limiting. Sometimes the most sophisticated tools aren't necessary if you choose the right approach. Physics doesn't care about fashion. It only cares about truth." The room stirred with electric tension. Did the custodian just suggest that the department head's methodology was unnecessarily complicated? "This is undergraduate-level hand-waving." Harrington snapped, her composure finally cracking under pressure. "Where's the rigor? Where's the advanced analysis that separates real physicists from enthusiasts?" Dr. Martinez stood up abruptly. "Actually, Elizabeth, I'd like to verify Mr. Thompson's approach myself." The next 20 minutes felt like hours as Martinez and two other expert evaluators examined Marcus's proof on auxiliary whiteboards. The theater held its collective breath while 120,000 viewers worldwide watched the verification process unfold in real time. Scientific notation filled sideboards as the experts traced through Marcus's reasoning step by step. His effort minimization approach was not only correct but revealed deeper insights into why Harrington's problem had been difficult in the first place. Finally, Dr. Martinez returned to her microphone, her voice carrying across the silent theater. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that Mr. Thompson's solution is scientifically rigorous, complete, and brilliant. He has solved a research-level problem using classical techniques in a way that illuminates the underlying structure that makes this problem challenging." The theater erupted in thunderous applause. Live stream viewers exploded with celebration. Scholarly Twitter burst into praise from physicists worldwide who recognized they had witnessed something extraordinary. Harrington's world crumbled in real time as her authority was publicly undermined by someone she had dismissed as unqualified. The prejudice that had seemed so reasonable was exposed as blind arrogance before a global audience. But this approach ignores critical technical details. Harrington protested desperately. What about regularity theory? Sobolev embedding's compactness arguments. Marcus maintained perfect composure as he delivered the knockout blow. "Professor Harrington, those techniques are certainly powerful and have their place in physics, but they're not always necessary. I've demonstrated that classical methods suffice for this particular problem. Perhaps the beauty of physics is that there are often multiple paths to truth, and sometimes the simplest path is the most elegant." A Yale professor observing via livestream typed in the chat, "This solution should be published immediately." A Princeton physicist added, "Extraordinary insight. This approach is actually superior to the standard methods." The expert evaluating panel reached their unanimous decision. Dr. Martinez approached the main microphone as cameras focused on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner, Marcus Thompson." The theater exploded in celebration. Standing ovations from physicists who understood they had witnessed history. News crews captured the moment when merit triumphed over prejudice. Livestream viewers sharing the moment across social media platforms worldwide. Harrington sat in her evaluator's chair, stunned into silence. The problem that had formed the foundation of her doctoral dissertation, her claim to scientific sophistication and scholarly authority, had been solved in 120 minutes by someone she had spent weeks trying to eliminate. Someone in the audience shouted over the celebration, "So, when's the wedding, Professor Harrington?" Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd as everyone remembered her flippant marriage proposal from days earlier. Harrington's face burned with embarrassment as her cruel joke returned to haunt her before cameras that would broadcast this moment to millions. But instead of humiliating Harrington further, Marcus approached the microphone one final time. "Physics brought us together today through this contest. I hope it continues to bring people together across all boundaries and assumptions about where intelligence can be found. His grace in victory made Harrington's attraction to him complete. Not just intellectual respect, but genuine admiration for someone who had proven himself her superior in every way that truly mattered. What happens when prejudice meets its match in both brilliance and character? As the celebration reached its peak, Dr. Martinez approached the main microphone with an expression that silenced the cheering crowd. Her face carried the weight of a shocking revelation. "Before we conclude," Martinez announced, "I have something important to share with everyone." The theater fell silent. Harrington looked up from her devastated state, wondering what could possibly happen next. "Throughout this contest, I've been troubled by familiar feelings about Mr. Thompson's scientific style, his approach, his insights, his elegant solutions. They reminded me of someone exceptional I once knew." Martinez paused, her eyes finding Marcus among the contestants. "I finally remembered. Marcus Thompson was one of my most brilliant doctoral students at Princeton 8 years ago." The revelations struck like lightning. Harrington's face went completely pale as the implications crashed over her. Martinez produced an official Princeton folder. Mr. Thompson completed all PhD coursework with highest distinction. He had finished qualifying exams, passed comprehensive reviews, and was deep into dissertation research under my supervision. The devastating details continued. His record: 3.97 GPA in graduate coursework, 3 published papers in leading journals, outstanding teaching assistant award, and the prestigious Rhodes Research Fellowship. The stunned silence was deafening. Harrington realized she had systematically humiliated someone whose scholarly credentials exceeded her own. Mr. Thompson withdrew voluntarily during his final year to care for his father during heart disease treatment. His departure was a tremendous loss to our community. The institutional reckoning was immediate. Institution administrators understood they had employed a PhD-level physicist as a custodian for 6 years due to their own prejudicial blindness. Harrington's cruel marriage joke now seemed tragically ironic. She had made that flippant proposal to someone more academically accomplished than most faculty members. The live stream exploded with shock and outrage. Viewers realized they had witnessed systematic prejudice exposing itself before the world. Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from Princeton offering immediate readmission and full funding. Yale, Berkeley, and Oxford followed within minutes. But as cameras focused on Harrington's humiliated expression, everyone wondered the same thing. How would the woman who had spent weeks trying to destroy him react to discovering she had targeted someone who was not just her intellectual equal, but her superior in every measurable way? The most important conversation was yet to come. What happens when pride meets the unforgivable truth about itself? Hours later, the theater had emptied except for 2 people. Harrington sat alone in the front row, staring at the whiteboards where her world view had been systematically dismantled. Marcus approached quietly, still wearing his maintenance uniform despite the offers pouring in from elite institutions worldwide. "Elizabeth," he said softly, using her first name for the first time. She looked up with tears in her eyes. "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you recognition of who you really are, and acknowledgement of who I became in trying to destroy you." Her voice broke with genuine remorse. "I let prejudice blind me to brilliance. I'm ashamed of every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment I treated you as less than human." Marcus sat beside her, his presence gentle despite everything she had done. "Elizabeth, you're not the first person to judge by appearances, but you might be the first to truly understand what you were wrong about." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. "About my ridiculous marriage proposal," Harrington whispered, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Marcus smiled, the first genuine warmth he had shown her. "Are you withdrawing the offer?" Actually, Harrington turned to face him fully, vulnerability replacing arrogance for the first time. If you're willing to get to know the real me, not the prejudiced professor, but the woman who just learned something profound about herself, I'd like to take you to dinner as equals. I'd like that, Elizabeth. I think we both have a lot to learn from each other. 7 months later, institution headlines told an extraordinary story. Dr. Marcus Thompson had returned to complete his PhD while serving as a visiting researcher. Professor Harrington had established a scholarship program, identifying overlooked talent among all institution staff. Their relationship had blossomed into something neither expected: love built on mutual respect and intellectual equality. But their story sparked something larger. Social media movements encouraged people to look beyond uniforms and job titles. Institutions nationwide reviewed their hiring practices. Countless stories emerged of brilliant minds working in unexpected places. The voiceover that had opened this journey returned with quiet power. Intelligence doesn't wear a uniform. Brilliance doesn't require a pedigree. Love doesn't follow social hierarchies. How many extraordinary minds are you overlooking today? How many assumptions are you making about the people serving your coffee, cleaning your offices, or working jobs society deems ordinary? The next time you meet someone, look beyond the surface. Listen to their ideas, respect their knowledge. You might discover that the person you least expect is exactly who you most need to know. If this story changed how you see people, share it. If it made you question your assumptions, comment below. And if you've ever been underestimated, tell us your story. Subscribe to Shadow Peak Tales for more stories that challenge us to find the extraordinary hiding in plain sight. The final image showed Harrington and Marcus walking across grounds together, professor and returning PhD student. Equals in love and physics. Proof that the most beautiful equations are sometimes found in the human heart. What extraordinary person are you going to notice?